All right, welcome back. I just wanted to discuss the Wild Blues series in terms of penalty minutes. No team really benefited in terms of blatant calls. For the most part, I just want to preface this with saying that there were questionable calls for the Wild's team, there were questionable calls for the Blues, and there were blatant non-calls for both teams as well. So I don't want to say that this is the reason the Wild lost. Because it's not. It's just not. It's that simple. It's that simple. But we do know the Wild's penalty kill and power play haven't been great all year, and going into last year, they weren't good. And the Blues have very good penalty killing and power play units, so it goes to benefit the Blues a bit. But again, this wasn't specific to this series. This was league wide. But This was kind of an odd one, so I kind of wanted to dive into it a bit. Again, there were some questionable calls made, barely, if at all, penalties, but going both ways. And again, there were some very blatant non-calls that probably should have been called and just weren't. So game one, there were 6 power plays each, which was kind of crazy. This was by far the most physical game, really the only physical game of the series, at least in terms of extracurriculars. 46 penalty minutes in total, 4 matching minors, mostly for roughing, but 24 minutes of power play time, which was it's a lot. That's almost half your playing time in a game. So it's a little high for a playoff game, especially one of this magnitude where you have the the 3 or the 2 and the 3, depending on how Calgary is, excluding Calgary. 2 of the top 3 teams in the Western Conference. Probably throw Calgary in that bunch. Could make it whatever, roughly. So 46 penalty minutes. Game 2, the Blues had 5 power plays and the Wild had 3. 16 minutes of power play time, 28 total minutes. Only 2 matching minors. The common theme is matching minors are typical in playoff hockey. You don't necessarily see a decrease in penalty minutes in the playoffs, but you see a decrease in times a team is shorthanded or on the power play in the playoffs, which kind of should even the cards a little bit. We didn't see that a whole lot. Game 1 being the only example 4 matching minors were handed out. Game 2, there were only 2 matching minors, total of 28 penalty minutes. Game 3, this was Wes McCauley. I thought this game was done pretty well. Wes McCauley was the lead ref on this. Blues had 3 power plays. Wild had 4 power plays. I didn't think there were any really any questionable calls in this game. They were all pretty blatant, pretty straightforward. I don't think there were any blatant missed calls in this game either. I think overall this was a very, very nicely reffed game. 14 penalty minutes in total. Moving on to game 4, each team had 4 power plays each for a total of 16 minutes of someone being shorthanded. There were a total of 20 penalty minutes in the game with 1 matching minor. Game 5, 2 power plays each. Total of 8 minutes on the power play for one or the other squad, 4 each. No matching minors. This was Dan O'Rourke's game. This is a very played out. Dan O'Rourke and Wes McCauley are both very veteran, good refs. They don't need to be the center of attention. Wes McCauley's a little goofy, especially with his penalty calls, but overall, they're not making blatant calls typically just to speak. It's respectable. McCauley and Dan O'Rourke are 2 of my favorite refs in the league. I think they do a really nice job. And I thought these games exemplified that pretty well. Especially Game 5 is kind of what you'd expect to see in an elimination game. Obviously, the Wild didn't win that. Especially being the home team, they probably should have won that. They didn't. So, needless to say, reffing it's not the result of the Wild losing. There's a ton of other reasons I'll do another video on. and it has nothing to do with them being pushed out of the playoffs for a bad reason. The Wild just weren't the better team in this series. It hurts. But the last game kind of bothered me quite a bit. This is an elimination game. The Wild are on the road in St. Louis. We know St. Louis has good penalty kill and good power play. There were a lot of questionable calls in this game, and a lot of questionable non-calls as well. I don't think it swayed. I don't think either team necessarily favored from the calls. I think they were pretty equally bad in both directions. There's no other word to describe it. It was bad reffing this game. But, fairly similar power plays in terms of the number. The Wild had 5, the Blues had 6. Total of 22 minutes on the power play for both teams, though, and no matching minors. Again, it's an elimination game. That's not what you want to see in an elimination game. You want it to be a Game 7. You want it to be an intense, physical-ish atmosphere. Let the teams just play it out and figure it out. You don't want to be blowing the whistle and have one team play down for half the game and the other team play down a man for half the game. It's not fun to watch. It kind of gets the heart rate up, I guess. You're like, man, my team needs to score, and then when they don't, it's a letdown. And then if they're on the penalty kill, you're like, oh my God, this goal could really change the tide of the game. Like they need to shut this down. And it's just, I'd rather just watch them play hockey. I don't know. It's just from an elimination game standpoint, you don't want to see 22 penalty minutes with no matching minors and no majors in a game. It's over a third of the game is penalty minutes. That's a lot. It's a lot for an elimination game. So obviously, overall, high penalty minutes helps the Blues out a bit because their special teams is strong. Really does not help the Wild out because their special teams are incredibly barren and weak, as they have been throughout the past 2 seasons. I call last season a half season, so I might refer to it as a season and a half. But the past 2 seasons, it's been rough. That's no fault to the Blues. Kind of worked in their favor a bit. And they were just as good on the power play as they have been. They were very good on the penalty kill as they have been. It's clearly something the Wild have needed and still need to address. It's just a shame that it kind of took hold into this series. Both these teams are very, very good 5-on-5 teams. And the Wild have slightly better stats 5-on-5, but the Blues are really, really good 5-on-5. So I was really hoping to see a 5-on-5, a very physical, high-scoring-ish kind of matchup. We didn't see that, and I think part of that to blame is the penalty minutes. I don't know. It's kind of a shame. I hope they go back to regular playoff hockey like we've seen the past few years. Not necessarily the last 2 years, but years before that. I think they're trying to make the playoffs act like the regular season, but I think you're giving the refs too much power as to who has the momentum and what's going to happen in the game. I'd rather see the teams figure it out and not the refs have such an influence on the game. Like Game 6, you can say I'm not going to look up the numbers because this is just an example, but if the Blues had 4 of those 6 power plays in a row in, say, the second period, that's really deflating for a team. That's tough to come into that third period and be like, dude, we can't focus on winning. We got to focus on staying out of the box because that's how we'll win. It kind of takes your focus away from playing your game, and it's partly what happened. So it's just, playoffs, you got to see them duke it out. I don't want to see this. A lot of 1s, 2s, maybe even 0s. We've seen playoff games with 0 penalties called all game. I'm a Bruins fan, so there's been a bunch of Game 7s where the Bruins have played in and have no penalties called. So again, it's just a common theme throughout this playoffs that there's a lot of penalty minutes shelled out, and they're not matching minors. They're teams going up a man or playing a man short. I'm personally not a fan of that. I don't think it's as entertaining to watch. You can make the argument, and I know a lot of my friends have made that argument, that the regular season, the way it's reffed, should carry into the playoffs. And I don't disagree to an extent, but I think when you're trying to figure out who the best team is, you want to take as many external factors out as possible, which includes the reffing, especially in an elimination game. If you're obviously holding a player, it's a penalty, fine. But if it's like a questionable call, like, oh, he got his arm on his back and his other arm was around, what was he doing with his free hand? It wasn't a hold, but it was close enough. We're going to call a penalty. Let those things go. Obviously you don't like when those calls don't go against your team, but it's like you have to be able to figure out what to get away with. I think an easy solution would be to go back having the same refs ref a whole series until it's done. Again, just kind of my 2 cents, my little analysis. I've been a little frustrated watching playoff hockey this year. Not just this series, but most series, because of the amount of penalties being called. I don't want to watch the Leafs and Lightning play the whole game. Somebody's on the power play. I just don't want to see that. I'd rather see them play 5-on-5. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Let me know what you guys think. Take care, all right?